Introducing National Streaming Sports, live and on-demand sports talk programming that you can access 24/7. Check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and X. And for the premier sports talk experience, tap into our Roku channel. Start your mornings with Mac and Jack covering all the weekend sports action. Then pour a cup and enjoy all the sports you can drink on the Coffee and Sports podcast. At midday, talk sports from east to west on the Coast to Coast podcast. Followed at night by some hot girl talk with Prim and Proper Sports featuring Sonia Pearson. Talk boxing on the Gloved Fist. Yankee fans tune in for Start Spreading the News. And there's more on the College Sports Huddle and Sports Scope with Robert Butler. And that's just a sampling. There are 20 podcasts in all and 70 weekly shows giving us a 3.4-star viewer rating. To find us on Roku TV, search for National Streaming Sports on the Roku search bar. Click on the logo and you're in. For laptops, mobile phones, and tablets, download the Roku app. National Streaming Sports, live and on demand sports talk for America.
Football season is here, and SeatGeek is my go-to for buying tickets. Now, with SeatGeek, every single ticket is backed with their buyer guarantee. We've all had plans change, and when you can't make it to the big game, SeatGeek has you covered. They're the only ticketer that allows you to return your tickets ahead of the event for credit with SeatGeek swaps. So when things come up, I know that my tickets won't go to waste. So what are you waiting for? Download the SeatGeek app to maximize your possibilities and shop live events.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Sports Memory Show. Let me get you go. Come on. I swear to God. Come on. What is wrong with this thing? Are we going to get rid of this overlay or not, computer? Let's see. Thank you. There you go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Sports Memory Show. As the host today, Mac, of course, Mac and Jack Sports, and a few others. James Martin, my partner in crime, and Jack Hirsch, who's my compañero during the week and also is on Glove Fist Monday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. We get together every Saturday, bringing the Sports Memories show where we talk about events and people from the past. And this week, for a change, I'm going to go first. I think I got maybe one of the most interesting guys I've talked about since we've been doing this, and that's middle linebacker Ray Lewis, who started out with the Miami Hurricanes. The Miami Hurricanes were a troubled team in college. I mean, they had a lot of problems in college where they broke a few rules and they got away with it because they were football players, and Urban Meyer there was a whole thing going on there. You had a tight end that played for the Patriots who ended up in jail. I mean, there was a lot of things during that time where Hernandez, he thought he was still in the gang, and then Ray Lewis was a big talker. There was a lot of things going on in Miami. So, anyways, Ray Lewis ends up in Baltimore, and the Baltimore Ravens in his rookie year, he led the teams in tackles. He ended up playing there 17 years, and he was 2001 Defensive Player of the Year. He led a defense that was really stingy, one of the greatest defenses in the history of football. 16 games, the Ravens defense set a single season record, allowing the fewest points of 165 and the fewest rushing yards at 970. He was the second linebacker to win the Super Bowl MVP. Very talented, very much a leader of the defense on the field. He won the second Defensive Player of the Year in 2003. And what was cool about Ray Lewis was, as far as playing career went, his last victory was a Super Bowl. I don't know if you all remember. That was his last game. Went out on top, which a lot of players, really don't do. So his career tackles some are still records. He had a 2,059 career combined tackles, 1,568 solo tackles, 13-time Pro Bowler. So, and considered one of the greatest middle linebackers in NFL history. I mean, you could put him up there with easily with some of the greater linebackers, the Nitschkes and the Chuck Bednards and the, of course, the Dick Buckuses. He was that type. He was big, he was strong, and he was fast. But there was some problems with Lewis besides college when he got out of and ended up in the pros. He was actually charged with murder. So let me get to it right here. This is from a January 13th article. Lewis pled guilty to obstruction of justice with the stabbing death of two men. The case is still unsolved today. Lewis pled guilty for obstruction, which was a misdemeanor, originally charged with murder, but struck a deal with the prosecutor, saying that he would basically, for his testimony, he would talk about the other two persons, what they did that day. He really didn't come down on those two. He really didn't give the prosecutors clear evidence or clear testimony about his two friends that were involved. So he kind of did a okey doke on a prosecutor. He was supposed to come in and lay down some testimony on these two guys that would implicate them in the murder. But he did not do that to his two friends, and they were acquitted. The two men went to a sporting store the day before, bought some knives. One of the victim's blood was on the knife that was found in Lewis's car. Lewis told the passengers to keep their mouths shut, and that white suit that Lewis was wearing disappeared that night. So, I mean, I've seen people go to jail on a lot less than that, to tell you the truth. So, I mean, I don't know, guys, if it was because he was a professional football player and these guys were his friends, and maybe he ended up getting out of a free jail card because of this. But they did not come back at him and try and charge him with anything else. And still unsolved today. I feel bad for those parents of those two people that ended up getting killed. What are your thoughts?
The legal system and covering up for someone else is complex. So I'm going to tell you a story very quickly about this obscure boxer called Gerald Harris, who served 9 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. His brother committed the crime, and his brother saw when Gerald was going on trial, he figured Gerald's going to get off. So he's going to beat the charge and everything's going to be good. So Gerald gets convicted. Now his brother doesn't want to see Gerald go to jail. So he comes forward and he admits the truth. I committed the crime. So the judge says to Gerald's brother, screw you. You can't come forward now. The case is over. So Gerald served 9 years in jail before they let him out for a crime he didn't commit. And then afterwards, Gerald would have no business with his brother at all, even though his brother was begging, to be back in his life. Understandably, Gerald didn't want to know from his brother, even though his brother did come forward as soon as Gerald was convicted, because he didn't want Gerald to do the jail time because he thought he'd get off. I don't know the situation with the Ray Lewis case. I know especially when you're younger, you tend to want to cover up for your friends of them to get off in some way. And it's a mangled situation because if you tell the complete truth, maybe they go to jail. Maybe you feel they really aren't guilty because of the circumstances. It's very confusing, the Ray Lewis case. But I do know this, when the Ravens first went to the Super Bowl, with Ray Lewis, I think it may have been against the Giants, the first time he went to 2 Super Bowls. Super Bowl week is complex because all the things from the past come up because you have the world's media there and stuff that's not asked during the regular season, off season. Everyone's asking about the murder charge with Ray Lewis, even though it's long ago. And Shannon Sharpe is holding court speaking for Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis's head down is like a puppy dog. And Shannon Sharpe, in his loud, authoritative voice, is basically trying to put the media in their place. And Shannon Sharpe is making it so much worse for Ray Lewis in Super Bowl week because Ray Lewis is hanging his head down over there. And Shannon Sharpe, very intelligent guy, if his human first take, smart, intelligent, insightful. He strikes me as a good person, but it was an absolute disaster with him and his big mouth in that Super Bowl week. And someone should have shut Shannon Sharpe up because, when you come back at someone and you double down, sometimes you're making it twice as worse. And that's what Shannon Sharpe did on Super Bowl week. But I know Mike Francesa, the host of, the radio show here, well known. He couldn't stand Ray Lewis. He felt Ray Lewis was guilty of, certain of the charges in the past. But he'd always say, well, at least he's kept out of trouble, which kind of makes you think, is that the only trouble Ray Lewis has ever had in his life? And if so, you kind of wonder, maybe he just got caught in the middle of something, that wasn't his doing. But we do know this, Ray Lewis was one of the great inspirational leaders, the way he could rally people. And Jim Brown, who would have this organization dealing, I don't want to say with youth, I was going to say dealing with gangs. You guys might correct me and tell me. They visited actually President Trump when he first got elected in 2016. Trump requested a meeting and Brown had Lewis along because he wanted Ray Lewis to take over for him because he was getting older, take over the organization dealing with the gangs because he saw this leadership thing in Ray Lewis where he could rally people. People would be attracted to him and he could get things done.
He pled guilty to obstruction of justice, but the jury determined the killings were an act of self-defense. So on one hand, you're saying they were killed. On one hand, you're saying they were killed with a knife. So you are saying that something happened to these guys, but yet you're going to let Ray Lewis and the two guys off that actually did it. It doesn't make sense. The jury makes no sense. You can't say that, well, it was self-defense and then say, well, they're not guilty of anything. I mean, even in defending yourself, there's two types of defense, right? There's a defense where you can defend yourself without hurting anybody or without killing anybody, and then you can use certain force, right? You could use deadly force in certain things. These guys had no weapons. These guys didn't have anything. It ended up being a fight. So to me, the whole jury thing here makes no sense to me. And I'll tell you right now, the parents of these kids watching Ray Lewis on TV doing his thing, they must be out of their minds. Now, I don't know if there was ever a civil suit. I don't know for unwrongful death. I have no idea. But something really went crazy here, and I'm not sure what it was. Whether it was the jury and all Ray Lewis, or and all of having an NFL player, a Super Bowl guy there. I don't know what happened, but it's something really went wrong there. So.
At that time, too, the league didn't get involved the way they do today. If something like that happened today, even if Ray Lewis would have been cleared, maybe the league would have found his conduct detrimental. It would have been all over social media. There may have been an uproar. And the league certainly would have stepped in. Maybe they would have suspended Ray Lewis for a year on a conduct thing or what. Was he suspended by the league at the time?
Well, he did. You're 100% right, Jack. They did.
I didn't realize he was suspended at the time. Yeah. Was he suspended?
Fined $250,000 and suspended for 1 year. So you're right.
I didn't realize he was suspended a year. I didn't recall that. Okay.
He came back in 2003. So Anyway, so that's what I got on Ray Lewis. Let's let Jack go second, and we'll save James for one of the last ones. What do you got, Jack?
Yeah. It's football, the playoffs, the Super Bowl coming up. The Jets Super Bowl #3. I kind of want to talk about that. Being a Jet fan, the only Super Bowl appearance in Super Bowl history, and it was a long time ago. If someone would have said, you'd have this type of weight at that time, it would have been, off the charts. It wouldn't have been believable. But then again, certain other storied franchises like the Cleveland Browns and Detroit Lions have never even been to a Super Bowl, even though that might change for the Lions, in a couple of weeks. It remains to be seen. But Super Bowl III was so memorable because the Jets were the biggest underdog in Super Bowl history. They were an 18-point underdog, 18.5 points, depending on which bookie, you went to. There could have been 19 points in some betting parlors. But, a lot of people thought the odds should have been bigger than that. That was even a little too close, because the first two Super Bowls, the Packers, they beat the Chiefs by 25 points. The next year, they beat a 13-1 Raider team by 19 points. And some people were calling the Baltimore Colts, who the Jets are playing in the Super Bowl, the greatest team in NFL history. They had a 13-1 regular season record, and their one loss against the Cleveland Browns, they avenged in the championship game by beating the Browns 34-0. Okay? And the Colts had to win 2 games to get to the Super Bowl. That was a setup in the NFL, and the Jets in the AFL, the Jets had to win only 1 game to get to the Super Bowl. So the Colts beat the Vikings 24-14. They had a 24-0 lead and coasted. And then, of course, like I just mentioned, they totally dominated the Browns, shutting them out 34-0. And the Jets played a classic game against the Oakland Raiders, in the AFL championship game, which they won 27-23. Now, the Jets were 11-3 during the regular season, and one of their losses was to the Raiders. So they kind of avenged that game in a sense. And the regular season loss to the Raiders was the Heidi game. The Jets went up 32-29. And there's like a minute left in the game. We're watching on TV. And all of a sudden, NBC leaves the game with a minute left, and the Jets up 3 points. Okay? And they're about to kick off to the Raiders. Like, what the heck is going on? Because they want the little kids to see the episode of Heidi.
Did you hear that, James? You ever hear that?
No.
Heidi game. The Jets kick off, and the Raiders get a touchdown. Then the Raiders kick off to the Jets. The Jets fumble. The Raiders take in the end zone. Raiders win 43-32. But everyone is like in an uproar when NBC just leaves the game. I remember going to my little transistor radio, and getting kind of like an update, there. And so now the Jets have that great rematch, and I find it hard to believe, even though I believe it. The talk was that Namath was out all night, Joe Namath, and one of the police officers, security guys, saw him coming into the hotel like very early in the morning, with a female, whatever. And he immediately called up, someone to get in touch with his bookie to put the money on the Raiders. Namath can't be ready for the game, whatever. But I guess if you're young, some athletes can handle a lack of sleep. They don't think, like we hear about Michael Jordan going to Atlantic City. And we hear about Michael Jordan hardly ever sleeping sometimes. Some athletes are wired. They could go on and on and on, and maybe it catches up to them in the long run, but not short term. But what a game it was, the Jets and Raiders. It was one of the great NFL games, AFL games at the time in history, back and forth. Jets ultimately win 27-23. Now they're playing the Colts. And make no mistake about it, as a Jet fan, and other Jet fans will be mad maybe about me saying it, the Colts had the better team. And the best comparison I can give you guys and Mac can relate to this as a Giants fan. The Patriots were a better team than the Giants, but the Giants were better that day. The Giants found a way to overcome them that day. But you're not going to tell me if the Patriots and Giants played a full, 17-game schedule that the Giants were going to go 9-8 against the Patriots. It wasn't going to happen. The Giants were going to win some games. They would win a few games. Don't get me wrong. But the Patriots had a better team. The Colts had a better team. The Colts had great players, on defense. Bubba Smith, Mike Curtis, a great, middle linebacker there. On offense, Tom Matty, Jimmy Orr, John Mackey. I mean, Rick Volk on defense. They were loaded all around. They were great. Johnny Unitas was out, but their backup quarterback, Earl Morrow, was one of the great backup quarterbacks of all time. He was a starter for the Lions and the Giants. He led the Colts to a great season, but the Colts kept making mistakes. Not that the Jets didn't. The Jets fumbled the ball early in the game, and the Colts had it on the Jet 11-yard line, yet the Colts turned it over. Colts had 4 turnovers there, missed field goal attempts. But the game is remembered for Joe Namath going into the game, guaranteeing a Jet victory. But, I don't go for these guarantees. Athletes do it today, and it's complete nonsense and it's stupidity. You have a 50-50 chance if you guarantee. You either win or you lose. But so the game centered around Joe Namath, his personality. There's that classic picture of him sitting by the pool and the reporters around him and all. It's such a classic picture that Darrelle Revis tried to recreate it, before he was in the Super Bowl when he played for the Patriots, ironically. And the Jets had an outstanding pair of running backs, fullback Matt Snell, halfback Emerson Boozer, their wide receivers, Don Maynard, a Hall of Famer, George Sauer, who was outstanding, Pete Lamons, an excellent blocking tight end on defense. I mean, guys like Jerry Philbin, Jim Hudson over there, Johnny Sample, the defensive captain. And there was a story involved. Johnny Sample was the cornerback for the Baltimore Colts teams that beat the Giants in the NFL championship games in 58 and 59. And he was a rebel, outspoken, and he was kind of probably banned from the NFL, kind of blacklisted in a way, because of his nature. And he was a dirty player, Johnny Sample. He even wrote a book later, Confessions of a Dirty, football player. So he was one of their cornerbacks. So the Jets had a lot of darn good talent there, don't get me wrong. And Matt Snell should have been the MVP of Super Bowl. 30 carries for 121 yards, 4 catches for 40 yards, and even played a little special teams. Yet the MVP award went to Joe Namath. I mean, it should have gone to Matt Snell. And when we hear about the great performances in Super Bowl history, Matt Snell's name never came up. I mean, it just never came up. And I'll say it again, Matt Snell was the real MVP on the field of Super Bowl III. Namath once acknowledged it. He doesn't acknowledge it much. I remember Namath once saying in an interview, Matt Snell really did all the work that game. I mean, in the fourth quarter, the Jets, hardly threw I think they threw 1 pass in the fourth quarter. They just kept running with Snell in the Colts, and Snell kept grinding out the yards. He scored the game's only touchdown at Snell on a 4-yard run on a sweep. And the Jet defense played an outstanding game. How good a game the Jet defense played, people forget, would be in this. They're leading 16-0 with a few minutes left in the game. Time's of the essence. The Colts have first and goal on the 1-yard line. It took them 3 chances before they got the ball in the end zone. That should tell you a lot about the way the game went. And the Jets beat the Colts 16-7. By the way, when it came 16-7, the Colts executed an onside kick. So there were some anxious moments for the Jets if they could have gotten another touchdown. By that point, the great Johnny Unitas came in the game. He relieved Earl Morrow. but his arm had nothing there at all. Nothing at all. And the coach of the Colts was Don Shula. Keep that in mind. And Don Shula learned a valuable lesson in that game. Later, when he was the Miami Dolphin coach, like 3 years later, the Dolphins have an unbeaten season going, and Bob Greasy, his starter, gets hurt. Earl Morrall is the backup for the Dolphins, now Shula's guy. Earl Morrall leads the Dolphins to an unbeaten season going into the playoffs, and he yanks Morrall early in the game, in the playoff game, because he remembered the mistakes sticking with Morrall too long in the Super Bowl with the Colts. So he went to Bob Greasy, a starter, and it all worked out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stories with this Super Bowl. Unitas being hurt was probably the biggest one. If Unitas was healthy, it might have been a different Super Bowl. It might
never know.
Right.
Never know.
And the Jets defense was underrated, Jack. The Jets defense played their hearts out in that Super Bowl. They played an unbelievable game, forcing Merle to throw 3 interceptions. I agree with you. Namath's got the MVP. He never even threw a touch. He's the only MVP in history, quarterback, that never threw a touch, and I got the MVP.
Can I say something too?
Right.
Mac, I'm sorry to cut in. There was one big play to show you what a fiasco it was for the Colts and why I say the Colts were the better team. As much as I love that Jet team, I adored them. Okay, absolutely. And they were arguably my favorite team of all time in sports. But the Colts, right before the first half ended, the Jets up 7-0. The Colts run a sweep. Tom Matty turns around and he throws it to Earl Morrall. And the Jet defense is all one way. Jimmy Orr's in the end zone waving all alone for the ball. Earl Morrall doesn't see him. He throws it elsewhere and the ball gets intercepted by the Jets right before the half. Jimmy Orr's waving. No one is anywhere near him.
Yeah.
That'll give you an idea of the way the Colts unraveled all the mistakes, that everything was going wrong. That could go wrong with the Colts. But had the Colts been at the top of their game and the Jets at the top of their game, Colts would have won, but it would have been a tough game. It would have been competitive. They wouldn't have blown the Jets out by any means.
The Jets were not a bad team. They had a good running game. They had a good defense.
A running game, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they had an underrated defense, I'm telling you. And, they might have given a lot of points up to the AFL, but the AFL threw the ball all over the place. The Raiders threw the Mad Bomber they just threw the ball like crazy, the AFL. And that's why there were so many points scored. I like that Jets team too, Jack. And no matter what Bubba Smith says, the game was relevant. There was no fixing.
Did he say the game was fixed or something? What did he say, Bubba Smith? He wouldn't have said that, would he?
Right after the game, he said it was.
What did he
fixed.
say? Yeah. I know there was some. I mean, how does anyone fix a football game? I mean, I don't think Bubba Smith said that directly. That would have been ludicrous. I can't believe that for a moment. But you have all these conspiracy theories. Like even with Scott Norwood missing the field goal, one of the former players on the Bills said, "Well, because the helicopters were flying above, it kind of had to."
Yeah, Kenneth Davis said that. That's hilarious.
Yes.
Yeah, move the ball trajectory.
It could be. You never know. Them helicopters will sneak up on you. So speaking of the Bills and Scott Norwood, James is here to give us a little information about one of the greatest Bills quarterback of all time, by far, Hall of Famer Jim Kelly.
Wait. So let me just cut in 1 second. Sure. We'll take that after. You said the greatest Bills quarterback by far. They got Josh Allen.
Right now. He hasn't hit yet. He hasn't hit it yet.
Okay.
He's got to get to that point. Now, with that said, Jim Kelly is not only one of the greatest quarterbacks for the Bills, let's just say, but I mean, let's just say he's a great quarterback that played in the NFL as well. But he's one of the great quarterbacks from a draft. I mean, we're talking about 1983. 1983, all three, him, Dan Marino and John Elway were drafted in the same draft, man. That's an incredible draft that you get like 3 stud quarterbacks that end up being Hall of Famers. And wow. And then playing, they're all in the AFC playing against each other, but particularly Dan Marino and Jim Kelly. Speaking of that, their duel was Jim Kelly's 15-8 in the AFC East. They played each other that many times, and but we know why. I mean, Buffalo was a much better team collectively versus Miami. But with that said, going into Jim Kelly's history, Jim Kelly started out at East Brady, Pennsylvania. He went to high school in East Brady. He was a star quarterback there. He threw for about 3,500 yards and 3,900 yards, 44 touchdowns. But he was also a basketball player too, believe it or not. He played basketball in high school, scored 1,000 points. 6 games were like 30 points. And so, he was a stud coming out of high school, and he was highly recruited in some schools, particularly Miami. But one of the schools that he wanted to go to, they didn't recruit him. And that was his favorite team with, I saw this on a Football Life, was the Nittany Lions, Joe Paterno. They weren't recruited at all because obviously he's from Pennsylvania, so his favorite team was Penn State. And so he tried to get on the team, and Joe said he already had 2 quarterbacks that he gave scholarships to, but he said, if you want to come play for me, you can play linebacker. So he said, linebacker? And so Jim comes from a big family, a whole bunch of brothers, 5 brothers, 6 boys in all. And he told him what he said. He said, Jim, look, and I'm paraphrasing this. He said, when you're on a charter plane later on in your career, he said, the flight attendant is not going to ask who's the linebacker. They're going to ask who's the quarterback. And so he decided to stay at quarterback, which is pretty funny to me. But I just think he went down. He went to Miami. He went to a few other schools, and he decided to stay with Miami. And at the time, Miami, I believe, was an independent school. They weren't in the ACC. They weren't good at all. And so when he got there and under the guidance of the coach, when he came a year later, Howard Schnellenberger, they actually had some success. They had success. And Jim, when you watch him, you can see this guy was just like a gunslinger. To me, he reminds me of he's before Brett Favre, but man, he just threw the ball all over the place, and he had a rocket arm, man. And so he had a decent career. They had a couple of 9-win seasons during his time there. And when it came time to get drafted, he had teams that he didn't want to go to. He didn't want to go to anywhere cold. He wanted to go because I guess his time in Miami allowed him to get spoiled. He didn't want to go play for like the Vikings. He didn't want to play for the Packers, and he definitely didn't want to play for the Bills. So he gets drafted 14th overall in 83 by the Bills. And he's got a decision to make here. And here comes the upstart USFL. And they give him an opportunity. They say, you don't have to just play for one team. You can pick whatever team you want to play for. And the Houston Gamblers is the team where he went to, and he ended up playing for them. And so, mind you, while he's playing for the Houston Gamblers, the Bills still have the rights to his NFL status. And so he plays for the Gamblers. He goes there and lights it up. He throws in 2 years, in 84 and 85, he throws for like over almost 10,000 yards, including 5,000 in his first season as a rookie, and 44 touchdowns. And he was the MVP of the USFL. And his team ended up going defunct. They merged with the New Jersey Generals, Donald Trump's team. And then ultimately, before he even played it down, the USFL went defunct. And so Bill Polian is the general manager of the Bills. And he sits down and has a conversation with them and tells them, like, look, we got a team that we're building. We want you to come in here and play for us. We drafted Bruce Smith. And then, Andre Reed came later. And then you got Thurman Thomas coming later in 88, I believe. In 88. And this team under Marv Levy, they ran what was called the K-gun offense, the no huddle. the no huddle offense, and people would think that was called the K gun because of Jim Kelly, but it wasn't. It was because of the tight end number 84, and that was McKellar. And so they would throw the ball to him a few times under their quick no huddle offense, and they thrived in 1989, and then of course in 1990 is when all the success really started happening, and that's when they got to the Super Bowl. Jim Kelly, this was his only first team All Pro, obviously, and then they had a MVP season for Thurman Thomas, and these guys got to the Super Bowl, and I remember as a kid, man, watching that game. I'll be honest with you, I was pulling for your Giants because myself, I was just a little anecdote here. My little brother, he loved Dave Meggett, and we both started watching this team. They got a lot of hype at the beginning of the season, and I didn't know who Bill Parcells was at the time. And so we're watching this team, and I'm like, man, I really want the Giants to win, but it looks like Buffalo. I mean, the game was going back and forth, but Buffalo, and they were messing. I think Buffalo really should have won that game, to be honest with you. After looking at it, they dropped a few passes here and there, and of course, we all know by the time they got to the kick, Norwood missed the kick and went right, and that was that. But this team went to four straight Super Bowls, and the other ones weren't even close. If there was a Super Bowl that the Bills could have won, it was that first one. That was the closest one. The rest, I mean, they got blowed out by Washington, and then of course the last two with Dallas. Jim Kelly continued to play, but he was a tough guy. He took a lot of beating at the quarterback position, and ended up taking a toll on him. And you can see that it was just really tough on him. He played to 96, and his last play was a concussion, and so he retired. And having a really stellar career, but never ever it's just like you mentioned. There's some asterisks with players. That's not winning the big one is probably going to be his. I mean, not being able to overcome and win a Super Bowl. Not even though it's not just on him, but his Super Bowl touchdown to interception ratio is 2-7. So I mean, when he played big in other postseason games and in regular season, but when it came to the Super Bowls, they found an answer for him. Again, he had 7 interceptions to 2 touchdowns. And so the question is whether or not, even with all the accolades, I mean, is he like deserving to be one of the great quarterbacks, like you mentioned, Jack, or is he, or you both mentioned, or he's just a great Bills quarterback? And I mean, look, I look at his numbers. I think he had great numbers for what it was. He was a 60% completion percentage all-time quarterback. He had 4 straight AFC championships, but nobody remembers that. They just remember the Super Bowl losses. 237 touchdowns to 175 interceptions. 5-time Pro Bowler. I think he's in the Hall of Fame in Miami. He's in the Hall of Fame with the USFL. Obviously, he's the Bills Hall of Fame and their Wall of Fame. Great quarterback, great all-time. Again, a part of a great class in 1983. It's just whether or not the question is whether or not he's great all-time with all the greats.
Well, hypothetically, James, if Jim Kelly were playing today and he was in the prime of his career, I discussed with Mac the quarterback groupings, and right now today there's a grouping of a core 4 that stand out. You know, Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow. No one is quite in their group. Then you have the next group after. Would Jim Kelly be able to attach himself onto that group and saying it's a fabulous 5 instead of a core 4? I kind of feel, yeah, he would be at the back end of it at least, you know? I think
he'd be closer to the top, honestly. I mean, if you look at him, how he threw the ball, when he had time and he was protected, and, you know, again, he can unleash it, man. He unleashed the ball. But, I mean, I think the biggest thing is the rules are different. Quarterbacks are certainly protected now. I mean, even with bad offensive line play, you can't hit a quarterback any kind of way you did the way they got hit back then.
And he had a good coach in Marv Levy, because when Kelly was injured and Frank Reich was doing a really good job, and he led the Bills back to the historic win over Houston, they would ask Marv Levy about the quarterback situation, and he made it very clear. He said, if Jim Kelly is healthy, he's our starting quarterback. No, end of discussion. He didn't leave it out there for debate. I want to say this about Jim Kelly in comparing him with his teammates. Jim Kelly had tremendous mental toughness. Those Buffalo Bill teams they didn't really have it. And I'm going to tell you why. Okay, they lost to the Giants, tough game. I don't hold it against them. They didn't show up against the Washington Redskins the next Super Bowl. They fell down by 37-10. But even then, Jim Kelly kept trying to rally the troops. He kept saying, we got to win this game. We got to win this game. He was like playing like he was out of his mind, even though they were down 27 points and they got a couple late touchdowns. Then they got blown out the game he was injured, Super Bowl III. But in Super Bowl IV, you look at the body language of the Bills, especially going into the locker room in halftime. Troy Aikman even noticed that and made a comment. He said, I didn't understand. They're winning 13-6, and they're walking in there like no pep, no energy, the Bill team. But you see Jim Kelly like jogging off the field like he's gung-ho. You know, we could get this done. But it's like his teammates quit on him. And as soon as Thurman Thomas fumbled and the Cowboys got a touchdown, the Bills just quit. I don't care if they get mad. They could say whatever they want. As a unit, those Buffalo Bill teams were not mentally tough. Now, you mentioned the Jim Kelly legacy, all in all. Legacy's hard to pinpoint. Terry Bradshaw had 4 Super Bowl wins. Troy Aikman 3. No one is going to tell you those guys were as good as Dan Marino. Everyone will put Dan Marino at least a little ahead of him, right?
Yeah.
I mean, had Jim Kelly won 1 Super Bowl, would the perception of him have been much different? Or is Jim Kelly basically on the level of, let's say, a Steve Young who won 1?
You can't even put him there. I mean, like you say, if he won one, I'm just looking at the numbers. I hate to even use numbers, but 2-7 in the Super Bowl is pretty bad, man. Interception. I mean, don't get me wrong. When you're down, you're probably throwing a lot more to try to get your team and rally your team. But 2 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, that's not great.
Jim Kelly in the Hall of Fame?
Yo,
Yes.
2002.
Yeah, okay. So let's compare him. Phil Simms isn't in the Hall of Fame, is he? No. So, I mean, but Phil Simms was sensational as a Super Bowl MVP. Arguably, he had put in the greatest quarterback performance of all time in the Super Bowl.
In 86.
And he was part of a team for a 2nd Super Bowl win, and he's not in.
Yeah.
Well, you talk about the Bills. Wins and losses is not a quarterback stat, but if you're talking about Simms didn't play in that Super Bowl against the Bills. It would have been a totally different game.
It was hot stuff, right?
If Phil Simms was the quarterback, it would have been totally different kind of offensive scheme, right? They ran the ball. They controlled the ball. Hostetler ran with the ball. He threw a couple passes, but mainly it was O.J. Anderson who got the MVP. He's the one that did all the work for the Giants, and the Giants defense pretty much shut
down all over again. O.J. Anderson,
right.
About earlier.
Right, and the Giants defense for the most part. I mean, at the end, the Bills kind of made it iffy, but the Giants shut down the Bills' offense almost the whole game. So, I mean, you got to give Belichick credit. I think it was Earnhardt was the offensive coordinator for the Giants. The game plan was just changed because of that. So, but the NFC dominated back then, James.
I agree.
Late 80s, the early 90s. I mean, the Bills aren't playing, the Washington Redskins twice. They're not playing the Dallas Cowboys twice. It was different. Like the AFC's dominating right now, right? They have been dominating. It kind of goes in cycles. I think Jim Kelly was a very, very good quarterback. Is he great? I don't know. I don't know if I put him in Dan Marino's class. I don't know if I put him in John Elway's class. I don't know if I put him in Tom Brady's or Peyton Manning's class. I don't think so. I mean, he's there, but he's not them. man. You know.
You know, which makes me think, guys, Mac, okay, we talk about the draft. Let's say we had an imaginary draft. Every player in NFL history is 22 years old, and we know the type of player they're going to be, and they're coming out of the draft. Do you pick a impact position player, non-quarterback, figuring I could get Jim Kelly in my second round pick, so I could get LT in the first round, and I'll get Jim Kelly in the second round, and you strike immediately with a Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, and then get a great position player later on. I mean, do you flip-flop it? How do you do it?
That's hard. I mean, how great is how? I mean, especially Tom Brady. Tom Brady was not even in the first. I mean, we're saying if we knew now.
Yeah, well, we know what the type of players they are going to be. That's what I mean.
That's tough, Jack. I mean, that's tough. Would you? Let me ask you this: Would you draft Jim Kelly or Derrick Henry first?
Wow.
Well,
You talking about now or then?
Now.
Oh, I would draft Jim Kelly first.
You sure?
Usually it's always a quarterback.
I know.
The year Kelly was drafted, John Elway went 1, Eric Dickerson went 2nd. I mean, right. Eric Dickerson, one of the great running backs of all time.
There's context in the reason why I asked that question, Jack, because back then a running back would go number 1, because the game ran through a lot of times with some teams ran through the running back. But I'm talking about now the game's running through the quarterback mostly. So, I mean, I would take the quarterback. I would take Jim Kelly. Knowing what their careers end up being, I would take Jim Kelly.
Of course, King Henry's career isn't over yet. It ain't over yet. So.
You want to know something? There's so many outstanding quarterbacks in history. You could say, okay, I'll take Eli Manning in the 3rd round and get me, Jerry Rice and Ray Lewis, in rounds 1 and 2.
Right.
Exactly. And I could roll with Eli. You could have Patrick Mahomes. I understand. I'd rather go. Yeah, it's such a complex question. Oh,
Definitely
man.
Is. Let's talk about one of Jack's. You didn't know one of Jack's relatives was a pro football player, did you, James?
No, I did not.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about, I heard when I was a kid, Crazy Legs Elroy Hirsch.
Elroy Hirsch, yes. Crazy Legs Elroy Hirsch.
He wasn't a relative. Everyone links the name. What happened once? I'm covering a boxing show, and there's this boxer from California, okay? He's black. His name is Tony Hirsch. When they announced his name, why did everyone's head look at me? And I said, he's only a distant relative. That's it. I told him, don't look at me. Come on.
Somewhere, I mean, you're related. I mean, the Hirsch name, somewhere you're related.
I heard it when I was
Crazy Legs Hirsch
kid,
was with the Rams in 2019.
Crazy Legs at times.
Did you? I bet you didn't run like him. I'll tell you that, because 49 and 57 and 51 championship season. Check this out. Crazy Leg Hirsch tied or broke multiple NFL records. 1,495 yards in receiving. 12 games, guys. Averaging 124.6 yards per game. That's incredible.
Wait a minute. Was he a running back?
No, he was a wide receiver.
He was a wide receiver, okay.
Yeah. And
the
17 touchdowns led him to a 51 championship. His father said he used to do that on purpose with his legs. They said he ran like a demented duck, right? I mean, his legs were like, it was almost impossible to tackle this guy. But his father said he would go out and cement blocks, and he would do this on purpose, so he would be harder to tackle, I guess.
Right.
He went to World War II, came back, and of course finished his career out with the Rams. And the Rams in the 50s were a very good team. In the 70s they were pretty good, but is it today or is it tomorrow? They play the Eagles, and I think they win. I'm just telling you. I think
you're picking the Rams over the Eagles tomorrow.
I'm picking the Rams. I'm picking.
I heard a couple of people pick the Rams as well. I just I mean, logically that makes sense to me, but because I think the Philadelphia Eagles just outclassed them physically. I mean, particularly their offensive line. If they can manhandle that offensive line, if that defensive line of the Rams can manhandle, then they have an opportunity. But I just don't see it. I don't see it.
Well, I was wrong with the Packers, James. You could give it to me. There's so many mistakes. And let me ask you this: everyone is on Sam Darnold this week, and which is fine. But was Sam Darnold any worse than Jordan Love? You know, a Justin Herbert. Think of it. I mean,
wait, no, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I really think that he froze the last two games. The last game of the season when he had opportunity to get that number 1 seed. And they rattled him. You could see it in his face. He just to throw a pass to a dump off to the running back, he was missing. He was shook, and he was shook the second game as well in the playoffs. I think those guys weren't shook. Those guys had they lost games, but they weren't like in his situation. He seemed like he was totally rattled. Like,
and not only that, James, right? I mean, look at the receivers Darnold has. I mean,
yes, absolutely. You got stud, man. Come on.
And that's the biggest difference. Who does Green Bay have at receiver that wasn't hurt? And who does Herbert have as a receiver compared to Jefferson, Addison? I'm trying to think of the other. They got a good tight end. I mean, the Vikings are loaded when it comes to that. And they got a pretty good running back, too. I mean, I don't know what happened there. I don't know if Darnold I think he just kind of lost his way, man. I think he just.
Well, you know what it is. You know what I think the difference is. Herbert and Love are franchise quarterbacks, so their teams are committed to them. The Vikings aren't committed to Darnold. You know, he's basically going to be a free agent, and they have J.J. McCarthy in the wings. So the only question was if Darnold was going to really play great and take him to the Super Bowl, then it would have become an issue. But these two games, I just don't know where Darnold's going to be. He might wind up signing a 1-year deal with the Vikings, you know, and they'll try to get J.J. McCarthy in. But I don't think J.J. McCarthy is going to necessarily be ready to start next year. They might want to, yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm going to say he made himself some money. Let's not look at just total his whole season with those two games. The whole season, you can look and say, okay, this guy, he made himself some money, whether he stayed with the Vikings or he goes somewhere else. Because what's out there at quarterback and free agency besides Sam Darnold?
Well, what's out there? Who's going to want to sign him and take a chance and pay him big money? No one.
Well, I'm not going to say they pay him big money, but he's going to get paid. He's going to. I mean, what's the minimum for a starting quarterback?
Well, he got $10 million last year.
Oh, he's going to get way more than that.
Yeah, I could see him up. At least a 1-year deal, $30 million, you know, I can see that. Yeah, maybe he gets a 2-year deal, $60 million, who knows. But there's got to be one of the franchises who's looking at his body of work and is willing to disregard these last couple of games. But it's a nippy situation.
His body of work, he had one good He had one good year. What body of work?
Well, I mean, Jack. I agree with you on that, but at the same time, quarterback needy teams are going to look at what he was able to do this year.
Of course, they're going to. But is he a starting quarterback? I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't think he's a starting quarterback.
I don't know what I trust my franchise quarterback.
He's a starting quarterback, but he might be a bridge starting quarterback.
Right, I agreed completely. And he could be a bridge quarterback for the Vikings next year with the understanding of getting J.J. McCarthy ready, and that's going to be it. I think he's going to look at his options. You know, it's intriguing with the draft where Shedeur Sanders is going to go, because I'm a believer in Shedeur Sanders. I think he's going to be good. I'm not saying he's going to be great, but I think he's going to be a good quality NFL quarterback. He's too mobile. He's got experience. You know, he does have a decent arm, and he makes bad decisions now and then, but that could get straightened out. But the question is, I'm a big believer you draft the best players, except in a situation with a quarterback, that's a little different. You know, even though Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, the two best players in the draft. I hate to bypass them. If you need a quarterback and Shedeur Sanders is there, how can you not take him?
Did I read right? I mean, guys, tell me, because I think I read something where one of the Houston's wide receivers is not going to be playing today. Did he get in trouble?
Well, Devontae Johnson got cut.
He got caught.
Yeah, because he went after they won their playoff game against the Chargers. He was complaining in the locker room and had to get consoled because he wasn't getting enough throws to him.
Something is wrong with this kid. He's had 4 teams in one season, and he's talented.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I think Baltimore picked him back up, but I thought I read where
pick him up so they could trade him and get a draft choice late on. That was He's not going to see the field.
I thought I read where a Houston wide receiver got in trouble. I could be wrong. I thought I read that recently.
I hope it's not Nico Collins. That's their only guy. Tank Dell and
vehicle. Who?
Oh no.
Yeah,
that's not Houston. That's the LSU wide receiver. That's the LSU wide receiver, vehicular homicide, and he left the city. Yes,
that's what I read. That's right.
I think the Chiefs and Texans today, very low scoring game. I really think the defenses dominate today.
Yeah, I don't think Kansas City puts up a lot of points. I think they win though. I just don't think they put up a lot of points. Look, the receiving core for the Chargers weren't all that great. They were able to shut down the Chargers offense because there's only one guy to throw to, Lad McConkey. Quentin Johnson's a bust, but now they got to play up against a few guys in D Hop, Hopkins, and Xavier Worthy, Juju Smith-Schuster, Kid Kelsey. So it's gonna be a little bit more they got to contend with. Yeah, and of course Patrick Mahomes.
I think KC beats him by 9.
I'm picking Houston on a 16-13 type game. I really think it's very low. I think Houston's defense is.
That's your Super Bowl.
They might have the best defense in the NFL at this moment. The Texans, possibly, arguably.
I think I picked them for the spread too, though. I think I picked them for the spread.
They easy.
I think the Lions. I know. That game is tonight. Tonight.
Yeah.
Or the night game. I think the Lions are going to rout the Commanders, beat them 41-13. I think it's going to be a one-sided game. That the Lions are going to be ready to roll off the bat, and the Commanders are never really going to be in it.
Is David Montgomery back?
Montgomery's supposed to be back. Yeah.
So and look, the offense, they have one of the best run offenses, and Washington is number 30 at stopping the run. So that's going to be.
Wait a minute. Washington's got one of the better defenses in the league, dude.
They got a good defense, but they're ranked number 30 in stopping.
Wait a second. Let me see if I can find my show here. I know from what I wrote down here that Washington's got the 7th ranked defense in the league.
Yes, that's because of their pass and score, but not because of their run stopping. They cannot stop the run.
And they're not 30th. They're not 30th.
Is ranked 30. I wrote it down. I mean, I'm not blind.
Well, I can write anything down. Washington has a better defense than they get credit for. Here we go. Let me get here. Washington, the Lions defense is ranked 20th. The Lions pass defense is ranked 30th. Washington, let me get to them real quick. The rush offense is number 3. The rushing offense against that Lion running. I don't have the Commanders' pass defense.
I do. The defense, their offense is number 3 on their rush, like you said, number 17th in passing and 5th in scoring. So their offense is good, but their defense is 13th overall. They're 3rd against the pass, 18th scoring, and 30th against the run.
Well, that's all right. The Lions' pass defense is 30th, so we're going to pass. Well, the Commanders are going to pass all over them. How about that?
I don't know. I mean, the Vikings had that team, and they shut them down, man. I mean, I was surprised because I picked the Vikings to win that game in an upset. And they
shall see. I know there'll be a lot of fun watching tonight, folks. We'll be back with a big football show tomorrow. We'll give you the results of Saturday. Look forward to Sunday's games. Thank you for joining us. We shall see you tomorrow.